This is a model of Rome at the height of the empire, about 300 AD. It gives us a good idea of the size and complexity of this fabled city. And like most modern cities, ancient Rome was noisy, congested, and expensive. It boasted a population of over 1 million, far larger than any other city in the world. It was the place to live, a symbol that all Romans held culturally and spiritually dear. And wherever they settled, they tried to recreate the best aspects of Mother Rome. Structures like these were built from Spain to the Dead Sea, from Britain to North Africa. And they were built to last, first in cut blocks of quarried stone, later in brick-faced concrete. Romans came not just to conquer, but to stay. And the cities they built would alter the character of the land and the world of its people forever. Virtually all Roman cities were laid out in this regular pattern of streets and blocks, with the major public buildings located in the center, or forum. Now, each city needed certain things: houses, markets, and shops, aqueducts or some system for bringing in fresh water, baths and playing fields for the body, temples for the soul, theaters and amphitheaters for entertainment. And a city also needed walls. To the Romans, the wall and the pomerium were the dividing line between order and disorder, between culture and chaos. The gates in the walls lead to the main streets, which in turn open onto the forum. The forum was the focal point of commerce and local politics. As you can see, it's still pretty much the center of things. Along this side of the Forum of Pompeii was a large market called the Macellum. Next to it, another market just for the sale of cloth. Across the way, the large basilica, which housed the courts of law. There was a speaker's platform and the other main government buildings. Dominating the entire space was the temple of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, which symbolically and spiritually linked this city with Rome itself. If I were standing here 2,000 years ago, I would have been surrounded by a 2-story colonnade that provided shade for the throngs who came here daily. The Forum was the heart of the city, physically connecting it to the surrounding farmland, and in turn, linking the entire region with Rome. Our story begins in the year 27 BC. A generation has settled the dust of conflict, but not the bitter memories. And a town we're calling Verbonia is beginning its new life as a city of empire.
As in every Roman town, Verbonia will have an orderly arrangement of streets and blocks that will lay out nicely along the river. Here we have the Forum, the market, the bathhouse, and the basilica.
And here's the one you specifically asked for, Procurator. A theatre for the entertainment of the populace.
And you make certain my statue is prominently displayed? Above the stage?
Oh, yes, certainly. The sculptors are carving it now.
Personally, I'm looking forward to the time when we can build an amphitheatre for our gladiators and have some real drama.
The key to aqueduct design is gravity. Once the engineers located a source of water in the mountains, they built their aqueduct with a gentle downward slope to ensure that the water would flow along its entire length. The aqueduct rested on a series of arches which were supported above the varying terrain on massive stone piers. But when the aqueduct had to cross a river or a ravine and it became either impossible or impractical to build those stone piers, the engineers instead built larger arches. And if necessary, they built several larger arches, such as we see here at the Pont du Gard. An arch is composed of separate wedge-shaped blocks that are cut and fitted together in a curve. The blocks are held in place by a wooden frame until they are locked together at the top with a keystone. The weight of the arch at the top presses down and pushes the sides outward. But when you support these sides, the outward forces are counteracted. Now the wooden centering can be removed because the entire structure is stable. And with this design, the Romans could span almost any terrain. The Romans didn't invent the arch, but once they understood its potential, they used it again and again to span both interior and exterior space, and to carry water literally hundreds of miles if that's what was needed. When water from an aqueduct reached the city, it first went to a large holding tank or reservoir, like this one at Pompeii. Now the water entered the tank from this side. It flowed across the floor through these three channels and out through these three passages. This one led to the homes of the rich, that one to the baths and public lavatories, and this one to the public fountains. Now, if there was a shortage of water, the passage to the homes of the rich would be shut off first, then the passage to the baths and public lavatories. This ensured that the public fountains, which served the majority of the city's residents, would be the last to run dry. That, at least, was the theory.
Oh, of course! Why not? Rain.
This large house in Pompeii has a two-story central hall with a roof that is open to the sky so that rainwater can fall into this pool called the impluvium. The water then goes through this hole into an underground tank where it is stored until needed. We've clearly left the extravagant lifestyle behind, but these practical, well-built, and essentially fire-resistant buildings would have been affordable, and by the standards of the day, decent places to live. This is the Plaza of the Corporations in Ostia, a long, four-sided promenade built by the local shipping businesses for the pleasure and comfort of the citizenry. Those businesses imported wheat from Egypt, oil and wine from Spain, fish sauce from Portugal, iron ore from the mines of Gaul, and even wild animals from Africa. And in the mosaics which cover the pavement, we can see their corporate logos. Attracting regional and international trade was one of the prime reasons for establishing a city, but not the only one. They were also the centers of culture, and the people strolling this pleasant concourse were probably here during an intermission from one of the most popular spots in town, the theater. Romans loved spectator events, but only cities were large enough to build, support, and fill theaters. Like so much else, the Romans borrowed most of their dramatic themes from the Greeks, modifying them to suit their own tastes and sensibilities. They produced comedies, tragedies, musical revues. They brought in acrobats, jugglers, pantomimes, and orators to lecture on honor, duty, country, and of course, the glory of being Roman. Virtually all communities had a theater, and some were quite large and impressive. Along Roman roads like this one came the ideas and commerce that brought a facade of cultural unity to the diverse peoples of the ancient world. In Pompeii, and here in Herculaneum, we can see some of the touches that show how important it was to the Romans that their cities be livable. No private buildings were so high that they blocked all the light from coming into the street. And people who owned buildings on the main streets built roofs and balconies over the sidewalk for the shade and comfort of pedestrians. But perhaps the most interesting Roman idea about cities was the stated desire to keep them small. Roman engineers, those masters of order and control, knew that a city worked best when it was designed for a given number of people. Once that number was reached, the plan was to build a new city, rather than to stretch and strain the surfaces of the old one. But at its height, nothing in the Western world came close to Roman technology and city planning. And it was almost 1,500 years after the collapse of the empire before the world would begin to see its like again.